All right, good evening, everyone. I think we'll get started. My name is Sarah White. I'm Lakefront Planning Coordinator with the Chicago Park District, and I want to welcome you tonight to this fourth community meeting for the east end of the Midway Plaisance improvements. We appreciate everybody coming out tonight. I know it's a little rainy and there was some traffic to deal with, so it's great we can all be here in person. Tonight, we have our design consultant with us with an updated presentation on the east end of the Midway. Rob Rulin from Site Design Group will introduce himself in a minute. And we also have Heather Gleason here, Director of Planning and Construction from the Park District. And we're here to talk about the Midway tonight. And we would like to share an updated presentation, share the feedback that we heard at the last public meeting, community meeting 3, and also some of the comments, some themes from the comments we received during the 45-day review process. I also want to mention that in the ante room outside, we've got some other projects represented. So please, if you've got some time after the presentation and Q&A here tonight, stop by, learn a little bit more about other projects happening in the area. We have representatives from the Burnham Building Rehabilitation Project. You can ask any questions, learn more about that. We have a representative from the Jackson Plan for Interpretive Materials team who was here when we were in person last time. So please feel free to check that out. And then we also have our team from the Washington Park Framework Plan. We are just getting started on that process. So if you want to sign up to keep in touch on that one, our team is out there to chat with you about that. And we also have a representative from We Will, the Comprehensive Plan for Chicago. So lots going on tonight, but we're ready to dive in right now to our main event, a presentation about the Midway. And so I think I mentioned we're going to run through a presentation, feedback we've heard, updated design plans and how we've responded to that, the feedback so far. And then we're going to open the floor for a live Q&A. So you can see that there's a mic in the middle of the room. Please line up when it's time for the Q&A. We want to try to keep it to 5 people lined up at the mic at a time, just to avoid crowds in the middle. So please try to kind of organize yourselves that way. We are not going to set a strict timeline or a time limit on comments. We won't have a timer or anything like that, but please do be respectful of other people and, try to limit your comments to a length that's appropriate and what they really need to be. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob Ruland. Or do I have? Oh, I have more. I have more. Never mind. So, sorry. Here's our agenda for tonight. Community feedback, like I said, Midway Play, design updates, Q&A, and next steps. Oh, absolutely. And I should tell you, I'll say too, as long as I'm doing the intro, this presentation is being recorded, and similar to last time, we will put the recording up on the project website under the featured capital projects page of the Park District. So if you want to view the presentation or the Q&A, listen to the Q&A again, that will be available for you within 1 to 2 weeks up on the website. And we'll send out a note to everybody letting them know it's up there. And we will also post the slide deck so you can see a PDF of the slide deck. Oh. Oh, okay, I hear you. Nope, but and if you need to see a slide again, raise your hand. We can certainly accommodate, no problem at all. So yes, with that, I'm going to now turn it over to Rob Rulin from Site Design Group. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sarah, and thank you for all for coming out tonight and to see the updates that we've been working on so diligently over the past few weeks. So really want to start with the community feedback. As you remember in our process, we kind of went through before as a group, there's kind of a few different avenues providing for community feedback. So this is one of them, right? This is meeting 4 of 5 community meetings that have been held regarding this project. But there's also some specific review periods that we are required to have. And so one is the 45-day review period that we just got done with recently. And so the idea is we're going to go through some of the comments and themes we've heard at the last community meeting. We'll talk a little bit about some of the pieces we've heard during the 45-day review period. And then we'll show off the kind of current state of the plan and where everything's at. And you kind of see how we've been applying those, that feedback that we've received from everyone. So regarding some of the community feedback, so from the community meeting, here's just a kind of a quick summary that we have up here. What I wanted to go through was, a couple of specific items. One was this big idea of, preserving the historical character and historical defining features. And one of those really is the Cheney Good Memorial. And I think that's one thing that we really want to hit home, is that we will be preserving that and we'll be restoring that. And that is a prime directive of this project. So look forward, more things to come on that. But the other one, the couple of elements we had was, making sure that we consider site access and security. I think we heard that loud and clear at the last meeting when we were all here. Consider restroom facilities or proximity to restroom facilities, right? We might not be able to afford restrooms, but making sure that we have safe crosswalks or opportunities for potentially portable restrooms were a lot of things that we heard from the group. Maintaining the calmness and the serenity of the space was one that we heard. Maximizing green space and the openness of the space as best we can, given the framework. Considering wildlife and the effects on habitat in those spaces. Educational opportunities, so maybe there's an opportunity to incorporate that. Environmental stewardship, accessibility, obviously huge things for us, just as our overall design parameters. We talked a little bit about vending. We'll see how we can incorporate that in the future. Maintaining this, the north and south embankment in its current place. Concerns about noise. I think we all agree it is a very noisy site. We do need to make sure that we're mitigating that as best we can. And then considering this wide ranges and abilities, I think we had one younger participant in the community meeting who might have been a teenager thinking, don't forget about us, don't forget about me when you're designing these play spaces. In the 45-day review period, though, we heard a lot of other different elements. This is one thing that I want to make sure that, as Sarah mentioned, we have the project website. We encourage you to all go there, where every comment is posted. I think we had over 140 some odd comments during the 45-day review period. Some long, some short, some novels, and some just simple supports messages. But we did hear a couple kind of key themes that I posted up here on the screen. One was this idea of making sure that we restore and we preserve the space. Making sure we have accessibility and safety within the space. Consider the proximity to different elements or in the adjacent areas. Creating a sense of calmness, openness, intimacy. I know sometimes might seem opposed, but I think that's something that we really strive to achieve in our design, and we'll talk about it in a little bit. Obviously, habitat, wildlife friendly, promoting this environmental stewardship, and how do we educate youth about that? Minimal maintenance. I think that's something that we all want to make sure that that this is a space that's resilient and durable and easy to maintain, right? We want to make sure that you don't have to keep calling something if something keeps breaking. We want to make sure it's maintainable. Enjoying in the seasonal interest, reducing noise, nature-based materials, and this idea of multifunctional green infrastructure we'll talk about here in a little bit as well. So with that, I just want to touch a little bit on some of our community engagement milestones and where we're at in the process. Hopefully that's easy enough to read there on the purple. It's a little hard for me off to the side, but we're here. It's October 6th. This is community meeting number 4. We have another review period coming up at this fall when we submit for the IDOT and the State Historic Preservation Office review period. There will be a 5th community meeting this fall / early winter. Still trying to suss out the date on when that makes the most sense. And then the idea is that we're going to be wrapping up our construction drawings this year, maybe a little bit into the January period, so that we can start construction sometime next year in the spring. So with that, I will kind of give you an update on the design. There's a couple different things maybe with the design presentation that we'll have today. We do have an overall plan that we'll go through. We've also prepared some renderings of the different spaces that we can walk through, so you can really start to visualize what these spaces look like. Still working through, I think, some of the ideas of like what colors and materials things may be, so don't get hung up on it if you don't like the purple slide or something like that. But just want to give you guys a good sense and visualization of what the spaces are really becoming. So as we talked previously, and one of the things that's really important to us is this our overall kind of guiding principle or design concept for the space. And the idea is this idea of 3 interwoven paths, right? That you can take through a sequential play experience. It can be linear, it can be circular, it can be complex, but it's infinitely changeable. And the reason we want to do that is because we want to provide spaces that are unique to different groups and abilities, right? And so when you start looking at this and our ribbons that we're talking about, is we have kind of 3 major groups that we're trying to or principles we're trying to work through. One is space that's universally attainable. So that's that big fat line here on the outside of that teal line. This is going to be low sensory stimulus. This is going to be minimal physical exertion required to go to the space, 100% accessible. So this is going to be the lowest barrier to entry. But what's important to us is we want to challenge visitors to the park, right? We don't want to make it an entirely perfectly sanded down safe space. So we have moderated challenges in some locations. So we have some physical challenge, multiple sensory stimuli, medium level of energy. And then the third one is this idea of creating acceptable risks. So this might be for the brother or sister that's playing alongside, or maybe someone that really wants to push themselves. We're creating these physically challenging paths, and it's the highest level of energy and movement within that space. And that's all balanced around a series of gathering spaces and sensory nooks, as we're calling them. So just going to the overall plan, and I'll maybe talk a little bit in not too much detail about the playground space. We'll get to that probably a little bit more in the renderings. It's a little hard to read on the screen. But one of the things I want to right off the bat talk about, and I think this is something that hopefully you're all happy with, is we heard you out and clear about this idea of the lowland area. And so one of the things that we're working on doing is expanding this natural area on the east end of the park, and providing greater opportunities for stormwater infiltration. So taking that low spot that's continually wet, expanding that, enhancing that, and providing that opportunity for stormwater infiltration within that space. And so that's that darker area here along the east side of the site. Just west of that is an open lawn. So one of the things we want to make sure that we kept in the space was this idea for the open lawn. We had a mandate for a 30 by 50 area, 30 by 50 yards, I believe, for an open lawn within the space. And so that's still within the design. We want to make sure we have that opportunity for folks just to run around and be free of the playground, but still have that opportunity. As we move our way to the west, we have our main play space, and we can start to see the ribbons as they work through the space. We have our north-south connector pathway that still maintains the embankment adjacent to the railroad. A couple things that are newer to the plan that we'll get into a little bit of detail here in a couple slides. We've created these secondary pathways at the north and the south. And what this house provides us is a couple opportunities. One, it's a shortcut through the landscape, but the other opportunity, this is a great spot for potentially temporary restrooms, maybe a small tent, so you have a special event. So providing that concrete surface so you can have those support facilities at the play space. And then one of the things that just point out here, and we'll talk about a little bit greater detail, is the introduction of a crossing here at the south end or the southwest corner of the park. And so we've been working very closely with our partners at the Department of Transportation and trying to figure a way out to safely cross the street mid-block so we can have an accessible vehicular drop-off for those that might need it. So safety and access. So as I mentioned about the Department of Transportation, we've been working with them continuously to work on providing accessible vehicular drop-off at the connector path. And so that's this space right here. And so one of the things here is this area in yellow, which would be a designated loading zone and provide an opportunity for a drop-off. But the other part is providing a crosswalk and a drop-off on the south side here of the park. And so providing an accessible walk with pedestrian safety bump outs to shorten that distance to cross the street, have that signed appropriately, ADA accessible, signed, and creating that safe crossing across the Midway, something we think is really important. Now, this provides us a couple different opportunities now to go to different adjacent facilities, right? We talked about the importance of proximity of maybe bathrooms or other areas. So we have a crossing now at Stony here on the east side, and we go to the parking lot, we can go across, or we can go south here on the Midway. So the second thing we've been working on is talking about the accessible sidewalks, but also adequate signal timing. That's another thing when we're potentially with someone that might be mobility impaired, is making sure that we have adequate time to cross these streets. So that's one thing that we made very clear to the DOT and talking through what our needs would be. And so they're working with us on that as well. We're coordinating access with the public parking lot to the south. That's ongoing. We're exploring accessible parking along the Midway. This is actually kind of a unique challenge we brought to the Department of Transportation. If you go anywhere in Chicago, you're not going to find an accessible parking space on a city street. That's something that's usually not done in accessibility codes. This is one thing we're trying to push forward and find a reasonable solution in the middle so we can have these parking spaces along the Midway. And then we've been working ongoing with Metro. So we've had coordination meetings with Metro. They're proposing station improvements just to the west. We want to make sure that whatever we're providing is in line with what their vision is as well, so we don't have any points of conflict, and they seem to be very supportive and excited about the project so far. So I mentioned earlier the stormwater management approach. I think we had a lot of spirited, you guys had a lot of great comments at the last meeting about how we're addressing the open lawn and what we're doing with the spaces. And so we're really excited about, I think, this new design approach that we're looking at. But I think the first thing is, right, we want to make sure that we respect the historic topography within the space and how those landscape areas are laid out. I think that was something that we've been, really clear on with our first few meetings, especially with our consultation with our cultural landscape team. And something that the SHPO is going to be very keen on, making sure that we respect that. But the second piece, though, is we want to maximize that usable lawn space. And that, like I mentioned earlier, the minimum 30 by 50 area, but also enhancing the low-lying space over here on the east side of the site. We're going to include stormwater infiltration areas. We want to make sure this water gets down into our groundwater system as fast as possible. We want to minimize any sort of impacts on our sewer systems. I think we all saw the flooding here the past few months. We don't want that. So we're going to try to infiltrate as much as possible, which is great because we do have a lot of great opportunities for infiltration, especially down in this area with all the sand below the various landscape areas. So we're including perforated stormwater sewer piping to help collect and infiltrate that water into the groundwater. And then we're going to obviously meet and exceed the Chicago stormwater ordinance. Just a couple quick support amenities I want to talk through on the plan. I think these are some things we really wanted to highlight. In the center area of the space near the Cheney Good Memorial, we are going to be providing a shade structure. One of the things that we've noticed in all of our years designing play spaces and playgrounds and parks and things like that, shade is extremely important, especially in new spaces. So making sure that trees on day one just won't cut it. We need a shade structure out there, and so that's going to be in the center of the space. We are providing a drinking fountain and bottle filler. We mentioned the temporary or potential temporary restroom locations, so there are areas for those facilities to be placed if need be. We have our vehicular drop-off zone to the south, bike parking just adjacent to that, just north of the pathway, and then a series of park signage and educational signage throughout the park. So what does this all look like? I know the plan's probably a little boring. Let's start looking at this design space. So this is looking southeast in a bird's eye perspective. You start to see kind of the overall design of the space. So this is that shade structure I was just mentioning here in the center, and that's leading you into our embankment slide here in this artificial turf lawn. Out here you have the large lawn I was just mentioning earlier, and then the natural area just to the east of that. This is our main pathway as it works its way through the site, so the north-south connector. And then we have our ribbon walkways as they work through the play space, providing different levels of challenge and opportunity as you make your way through the space. And we have our various sensory nooks dotted throughout the landscape. And so I'll kind of go through a series of enlargements of these. So the first one, the sensory nooks, is this idea of smell, right? We want to make sure we hit all the senses within our design. And so we want to provide fragrant plantings and seating areas. And so this is looking into that sensory nook with the treetop adventure course into the background of the space. So that's right there at number 4. If you ever get lost, and on the left-hand side, they have little numbers and keys so you can understand where the space is. And then also what we're talking about is the topic point, why we're looking at this, where it says universally attainable at the top. So the next one is this idea of the mud kitchen, right? Obviously, we're not encouraging everyone to eat everything on the site, but we do have this opportunity for the mud kitchen, which is just a great opportunity for kids to play. And so there's a small bar space here and kitchen area, a counter space, and then different opportunities for kids to sit and work with water and the earth. Just past that, the third sensory nook is our sound nook. And so this provides an opportunity to get above the landscape, right? And so for an opportunity to maybe lay out on top of this net supported structure to be above the landscape, to hear how the wind manipulates the leaves and sway within that space. And so that's right here as you work your way towards the embankment slide. The other is touch, right? So we want to provide the opportunity for that tactile nature of the space. And so we have a loose parts play area. So that's just off the main path as you kind of work your way here at the south entrance. And so we have this area just meant for creativity and manipulating different pieces. And then just past that to the left, we have our site nook, right? So this idea of how do we work within site and challenge our vision? Is we have specifically a butterfly garden, right? So we always want to do multiple things with our landscapes, right? So we have a butterfly garden to help with sensory and sight issues, but it's also helping with our pollinator issues, right? We want to make sure we provide pollinators and all the great native landscape within the space. And then kind of holding it all down in the center, and kind of I think the gem of the space we're really excited about is restoring the Cheney Good Memorial to its original glory here on the day it was dedicated here on the right. Just over here to the left at number 6 to the top left as we work right through the space. This is our gathering nodes. This is a really great space for parents and caregivers and just people visiting the park to sit and gather, maybe take a break. It's right next to the Treetop Adventure Course. Again, you can kind of watch and see all the folks and how much fun they're having going through the different spaces there. Right here at number 20, we talked a little bit about all the different things that you can touch and see and feel. One of the things we really want to incorporate was water. Kids love playing with water. And so we have this water play node. And what's really great about this, it encourages teamwork, right? So this is one of the things that's really important to start to design these spaces, play spaces, and especially these nature play spaces, is teamwork. And so what you have up here at the top is a pump, right? So a simply, easily manipulated pump system. So that will control the level of the water as it goes down. But then there's also multiple opportunities along the way for kids to manipulate the water, maybe dam it up. One kid moves the rocks out of the way and the water comes down, the other guy's pumping. So everyone gets to work together to manipulate and play with the water. Another thing that, especially in Chicago, it's always about the swings. And this is probably one of the most unique swing sets we've ever come across as designers. And we're really excited about this. This provides an opportunity, as you can see on the right, for someone that might be wheelchair bound versus maybe an able-bodied person to sit in the same swing and swing together. I mean, this is something that's cutting edge, and we're really excited about this because not a lot of playgrounds. I don't even know if the Park District has one of these in their system. So this will be the first one. And we're really, really excited about this. Just in front of the Cheney Good Memorial, just off to the side, right? I mentioned this earlier, this idea of including the shade structure. So right now we have this really unique metal shade structure with maybe some panels that you can see through, maybe some different fun colors, providing an embankment slide, and then an opportunity to sit and transfer off to the side, right? So if you are maybe have some mobility issues and you go down the slide, you don't have to sit there and wait. The guy, it's the kid at the top of the swing or the slide, it's waiting for you to get out of the way. You can scoot to the side, get back in your wheelchair. And it's a really, really neat idea that we've seen a couple other projects pursue, but then providing opportunities to challenge yourself and climb back up to the sides of the space. Opportunities for meandering gardens. I mentioned earlier low maintenance. Well, when he's talking about gardens, I think the idea is we want to provide opportunities for drought tower, low maintenance native plantings will thrive in a play environment and set them up for success, right? So one of the things you're seeing here is there was maybe some little barriers around the side to keep the kids from running through the garden space, maybe keep the dogs out. But still providing that opportunity and that variety in landscape, so it's just not concrete and grass. And then, providing this opportunity for enclosure. We mentioned earlier this balance of openness, but maybe a sense of intimacy and enclosure. I think this is one of the areas I think where we achieve it pretty well. And this is this idea of this mini forest maze. So providing this opportunity maybe for a quick moment of enclosure within the space to walk through the landscape. Another really fun thing that we're excited about is this idea of a rumble path. So this is it's a concrete surface that we're going to make it almost like a little park kind of, but like really tight, but it's designed for wheelchair users, right? So they can provide that opportunity to challenge themselves to go up and down, maybe some steep slopes or maybe a tight cross slope, and provide just another level of fun and excitement within the playground. So it's just not always a simple concrete sidewalk. And this is something where, you look off to the right, that's a challenge course, right? So that's a balance beam made of logs for maybe their brother or sister to challenge them to a race through the space, right? It's about cooperative play. We're not trying to single one group out versus the other group. We want everyone to play together within the space. And then that kind of leads to some of our greater challenges right here. So we talked about maybe more about our different paths, different opportunities, maybe a small ropes course, still low to the ground, not a very high thing, but again, something that can challenge you physically and mentally as you manipulate or climb up the side of that small slope. And then finally, the one thing that we're probably most excited about is this opportunity for the Treetop Adventure Course. And so giving the visitors an opportunity to get up in elevation, albeit not very high, but high enough to be within the tree canopy so you can see the trees in a different way instead of being on the ground and staring up at them. So providing those visitors an opportunity to get up off the ground within the space as well. I think that's it, Sarah.
All right, thanks, Rob, for the presentation. So that concludes the formal presentation for the evening. I've got a couple wrap-up items on next steps after the Q&A. So at this time, we would love to start the Q&A. If the first 5 people would like to line up at the mic, that would be great. Rob, can you test that mic and see if it's working? All right.
It is now.
Thank you. And like I said, we're not going to restrict time or have a time or anything like that, but please be considerate. There's a lot of people here that might have comments to share. So with that, I'd like to invite our first speaker. It's a tall person microphone.
So I've been looking at this online, and I just want to say I'm totally amazed at how you can get children in wheelchairs into these amazing things. Talk to me about the ski slope and how that works for kids with wheelchairs. Because I have 2 friends this afternoon that we were just facing just that obstacle. How do we get kids up and down a hill who are in wheelchairs? How do you do that?
All right, thanks, Rob.
So specifically the area by the slide you're asking?
Yeah.
So the way we do that is there's a couple different ways. So one, if you're able to run up the hill or climb, you can do that. If you're in a wheelchair, there's an opportunity to actually go around the side of the site. So it's a little bit point out right here. All these walks, that big ribbon around all both sides is a fully accessible walkways that meets all the accessibility requirements and slope requirements for that. With the height of that, it's not much taller than the stage in reality, right? So you're not going up a big distance, right? But that general lawn space is probably about the size of this stage of the chair. It's a gradual opportunity.
I watched some other this afternoon, a friend of mine with her child who literally carried her 8-year-old child up a hill like that. If she'd had a slope like that to go around and take the child down, that would be one. As this child gleefully giggles as she comes down the hill. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a couple of quick ones here for you.
And I'm sorry, can we state would you mind stating your name and affiliation if you have one?
Roger Huff, and I'm
Thank
a
you.
community member.
Thank you.
So my first question relates to, and this is the first of the meetings of this project that I've seen. There's space between each of the Midway Plaisance roads and 59th on the north and 60th on the south, and they were not included in your area of coverage. So they're just going to be left to be dead grass?
Yeah, so at this time, you're correct. Our original scope was just the central portion of the Midway that is following the directive of both the MOA and the UPAR amendment. So we are focused there. We heard a lot of concerns about accessibility and safety for drop-off for the site, particularly since we're serving a community that, has physical impairments. So we did expand our scope to include crosswalks on 59th and 60th, and we're working with CDOT on those alignments, but otherwise, you're correct. We do not intend to improve, at this point, the grass parkway in between those roadways.
I'd urge you to reconsider.
Thank you. Okay.
Second was the South Midway Plaisance heads from west to east. So when you pull over on the north side of it, you're getting out on the left side of your car. And the same is true on the North Plaisance when you're heading from Stony west. If you pull over to this area, you're getting out on the left side of the car. Has anybody thought about that?
Yes.
Yeah, I can answer that. That was actually quite a conundrum for us as we were going through this, right? Because initially we thought we'll just pull off to the side here and you can drop off. But obviously when you're working with someone that needs assistance, they're usually coming out of the right side of the car, a van door, a passenger. So we want to make sure we're providing access out of the right side of the car as well. So when we were going back to that earlier slide about all those crosswalks going to the south, that's how we were addressing that. So we have opportunities to pull over on the north side and as well on the south side, so we can handle both that and then provide that accessible crossing. But yeah, that was a big challenge.
Okay, so you're working on that. That's good. What's the elevation drop between the highest point on the path and grade?
4 feet, maybe 3 feet. It's pretty gradual over the site. It's not super obvious when you're out there.
So this is only all the ups and downs and around. He thinks it's only up and down 4 feet.
I would say that the elevation at the highest point is by the Cheney Good Memorial, where we're popping up to have that embankment slide. And I think that's going to be about 3 feet higher than the rest of the area. If you go out there right now, it is higher than the rest of the park. There's that little ridge and it goes down, but about 3 feet.
Okay. And my last little question here is, I didn't see the zip line.
No zip lines.
No zip line.
Another day, another project.
Another
One day.
project. Oh, one more. Has your organization put together anything like this someplace else that's existent that people could look at?
Oh, sure. We've done, I would say, well over a dozen playgrounds for the Chicago Park District so far. Worked on Mary Bartolome Park in the West Loop. We recently did Seneca Park in the Gold Coast. But never anything that's 100% focused on accessibility like this. This is going to be like one of a kind to the nation.
Could you put a list of those locations on the website?
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
this is other work we've done. So if you want to go see that as constructive, not just in your head.
Yeah.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Cy Lewis. I am Executive Director of a nonprofit, Meadows Eastside, and I also am on the Jackson Park Advisory Council, South Shore Cultural Center, and sometimes Midway. So first of all, I'd like to say this is probably one of the most brilliant designs I have ever seen for accessibility for children. I spent almost 10 years as a diverse learners teacher. And one of the biggest issues that we ever had was finding a place for our children to play. So yes, we could take them to indoor centers, which didn't have the type of accessibility that they needed, but those children needed fresh air and they needed equitable access, just like every other child, to play and to be able to play with their friends that they sit with at school. And this is a design that allows them to do that. So I applaud you for that. So one of my pressing questions is, how do we ensure that something like this comes to fruition, that this plan comes to fruition? How do we support you? Who do we need to talk to? What do we need to get signed? How do we move it forward so that all children everywhere, and especially on our South Side communities and our kids who don't have access to a lot of anything, can have access to this?
Thank you for your question. So this project is required to be constructed as part of the MOA. That was a result of the development of the OPC. So we are designing and going through community engagement process and final approvals with the SHPO and IDOT. We're required to do that by the end of this year. And then we'll start construction documentation and construction next year. So right now we are working on refining our plan so we can be in budget, so we know that we can afford to build this. And some of the plan changes we went through tonight reflect that work. And otherwise, I think, you know, we really appreciate you showing up here in support of the project, and we're just going to keep moving forward.
I would just add one piece. You had about how to make sure this happens in other communities as well, and not just here. I think one of the things that's been so interesting and fascinating about this process is all the research that's gone into it, right? You know, this is something there might be only like a handful, like 1 or 3 to 5 in the nation that are this successful at accessibility. And I think with that research and that education that we've taken on, I think us as designers in the park district as a service provider have learned a lot. And I think there's a lot of lessons that we're going to take and apply to future playgrounds. So it's not just a transfer platform or a simple accessibility thing, but it's baked into the design from day one. And it doesn't have to be a special playground that we're talking about, right? One-off, a unique thing. It's something that happens everywhere.
Yeah, if I may add that La Rabida is not very far from this space. There are a lot of parents that take their children for services there that would enjoy this space, and their children would benefit both physically and emotionally from being able to take part in a space like this. The city of Chicago has a lot of land. I could speak specifically to South Shore, which is the community that my nonprofit supports. And in the building of new play spaces and expanding of parks, would it be possible to do something like this on a smaller scale with the information that you all have culled from doing this design?
Yes, the answer is yes, absolutely. And we've learned a lot going through this process. And I think we've kind of are really excited about expanding this throughout the city. So absolutely, this is scalable. The concepts are could be universally applied against to all types of playgrounds. So it's something the Park District feels really excited about and is looking forward to prioritizing in the future.
Okay. Thank you very much for answering my questions, and thank you very much for your design.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Patricia Harper, and I just have a couple of quick questions, and let me preface that by saying that they may be premature based on construction, but if I explain where I'm coming from, that may understand why they just popped out to me. I function in an advisory capacity to the JPAC for golf, member of some of the long-term neighborhood resident here in Hyde Park, very familiar with that space. So, and got on the Zoom call, probably the first and second one when the visioning was going on. And I just have to say, I am super enthused and overwhelmed in a very positive way of how this is being fleshed out very, very tangibly. And I think it's just a wonderful improvement of a natural space that's already there, and recognizing that we get the suffragettes, so that people will pay attention to them. I'm still a bit disturbed by the Franklin Douglas Memorial that's in Jackson Park, that's just lost in the grass and so on and so forth. So hopefully the continued renovation of the park and upgrading of the park will take these other things in. But the two things that popped up is when you were talking about the water play node, and you're absolutely correct. There's not a child that if there's water, they're gonna jump in it, play in it, and do. My children prove that in every small child I see. But I just had a simple question. Is the water play node going to be an open or closed system with respect to the water?
It's an open system.
Okay.
It won't recirculate.
Okay. And just ask that on some very technical issues. And then with the rumble path, you did mention that it was going to be constructed out of concrete, but what is the surface going to be on that concrete, or has that been envisioned? Because again, when you're dealing with mobility impaired and specifically wheelchairs, but not just anyone who has any type of mobility impairment, a lot of the parks and its stuff that is already being used is embedded in the surface of the concrete in order to provide extra traction, so it doesn't make it too hard, but it doesn't make it too easy, and it makes it much more safe. So those are just the two couple things.
We would have an aggregator, like a stone chip in the concrete to give that traction.
I figured, but I just thought I'd, because those are the things. because this comes from my, I'm retired now, but this comes from my work life and work history. I spent almost 37 years working for the federal government in a civil rights enforcement,
Sure.
which included ADA, Section 5, and all of the other ancillary statutes that got thrown at us. We even got HIPAA at my agency, so very diverse. And, so that's why these things pop into my head. Thank you so
Yep.
much, and thank you for
Thank
a
you.
very informative presentation this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Hi, and good evening, and good evening to everyone here. My name is Bronwyn Nichols Lodato. I am the president of the Midway Plaisance Advisory Council. I have a few questions about the presentation, and then also, with everyone's indulgence, I'd like to read a statement from Mark Lipinski, an officer with Impact. He had a family emergency and was not able to attend tonight, so I will move through briefly and expeditiously. So first off, in terms of my comments and then just a couple of questions, just wanted to acknowledge that the selection of the eastern end of the Midway as a U-Car replacement site is a critical concern that Impact has been raising since 2018. And it's related to the Section 106 process that designated the eastern end of the Midway for U-Car replacement, absent a transparent, fully public process to identify the location. And so that's not been shared out, but I wanted to make sure that's noted for the record. The other important consideration from Impact in terms of the positions that it's taken around this is in favor of more equitable park access throughout the south side of Chicago. And that is inclusive of the immediate areas surrounding Jackson Park and the Midway Plaisance. What is of greatest concern for us is the fact that there's a proposed $3 million investment in a pre-existing park when there are other areas that are desperately in need of open green space has been stated earlier by other commenters. The other really critical issue with the presentation tonight is there's no mention of the removal of the wetland that's currently located in the proposed construction site. So I'd like to have a little more explanation regarding that. So that's thing one. And just really quickly,
Okay.
Before I move to Mark's comments, I'll yield the floor for you to answer. Is I just want to also highlight in terms of the review that was given of the comments that came over during the 45-day review period, 80% of the comments called for moving the U-Car replacement site off of the Midway Plaisance. So just wanted to make sure that was very clear. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I just want to be crystal clear here. So we're not removing the wetland area. We're going to be enhancing it to a degree. So that natural area, and I'm just going to stand up a point right.
And this is a change to the plan.
Okay,
Since
I
last
just
time.
want to be
This is
clear
a
because
change,
the word
yeah.
wetland was never used. So I wanted to be
Yes.
clear about introducing piping and stormwater when mitigation issues when there's already a wetland.
The idea is that some of the edges might get manipulated, but in general, it's going to be increasing in square footage and size. And the idea is that we're also going to be enhancing it with the appropriate native vegetation designed and selected for that use.
Sort
So-
of similar to the area just north of the driving range at Diversity. If anyone's familiar with that, when you drive up Lakeshore Drive, if you're heading north, it's on the left-hand side. It was a project that we did last year where we there was an ask to get some high and dry, more usable lawn space closer to the neighborhood. And then we kind of enhanced the retention area next door.
Okay, so the other question though is just to acknowledge that the U-Car replacement siting at this location was not driven by the community, but was a top-down designation. Is that correct?
That is something that we've heard that shows up in a lot of the comments, and we've talked about a lot of our meetings. We do not have a representative here tonight from DPD to kind of give the full backstory about that, but yes, we acknowledge that.
I
as a
raised
comment.
that because the National Park Service in the comments did ask for clarification on that point. So as that information becomes available, if you could share that out, that would be helpful.
Yeah, no problem. Yep,
Okay.
so that's our next step is to go through review with MPS and also another review with SHPO. So we're kind of coordinating that with our agency partners, IDOT, CDOT, and TPD. So we will be in communication about kind of next steps with that, and we will be sharing back at community meeting number 5. So when we're back in a couple of months, maybe after the first of the year, we'll have a report out.
Okay, thanks. And just for the record, MPS has oversight of the UPAR program.
Correct.
Okay. And so just the final point I just want to underscore is simply that to invest and replace park with existing park where we have park inequities on the south side is incredibly cynical and completely disregarding of the fact that there are communities that have been Black communities disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, and as the need for more open green space has become even more apparent, I would ask that there be more sensitivity around thinking about where a $3 million investment can go to really enhance life outcomes. And it can start with this investment in this park idea in places that are desperately in need of park. And I'll just close by quickly going through Mark Lipinski's statement. Some of this is from a statement that he made at the board. So some items have been addressed by the Park District, but again, he wanted to have it reiterated for the record. Now speaking on his behalf, Mark Lipinski, who is the Vice President of the Midway Plaisance Park Advisory Council. At Impact's April 13th, 2022 meeting, we passed a resolution seeking procedural changes for community meetings concerning the eastern end of the Midway. First, the audience for the meeting should be allowed to orally present statements or questions in the presence of all audience members and a microphone if available. Second, panel members should respond to those statements or questions in the presence of all audience members. And third, an officer of our PAC should be included on the panel. That's not happened yet. Hopefully it will. Previous meetings concerning planning for the Midway and for Jackson Park have precluded meaningful public input. For in-person meetings, audience members have been asked to circulate among various stations, asking one-on-one questions. This prevented other audience members from hearing the questions asked and the responses. Similar problems have been encountered in virtual meetings. In a Hyde Park Herald article concerning UPark, a senior Park District employee was quoted saying that, quote, the determination through a long federal review process with a lot of community input was that the eastern end of the Midway Plaisance was the appropriate location for that space. The city of Chicago selected the eastern end of the Midway for UPAR replacement without any public input. The Midway Plaisance Advisory Council was told at 2 meetings by representatives of the city's Department of Planning that the selection of the eastern end of the Midway for UPAR replacement was a quote unquote done deal. When we asked if other sites were considered, the response at the first meeting was that information would not be provided. At the second meeting, we were told that other sites were considered, but the representative refused to identify any. The city of Chicago has claimed that the UPAR replacement site must be in a landmark park, which conveniently rules out other non-park sites and patently flouts the purpose of UPAR, which is to provide resources to underserved communities irrespective of landmark status. That being said, the Park District's Lakefront Framework Plan provides for 6 play areas and 8 pickleball courts in Jackson Park, all of which fall within the playground activity ambit of what is proposed for UPAR replacement. To the extent these areas are already built and modification would not be feasible, it would be simple enough to provide for another play area or set of pickleball courts in Jackson Park while avoiding the destruction of the wetland at the eastern end of the Midway. In 2018, our PAC adopted a resolution concerning the use of the eastern end of the Midway for UPAR replacement and provided it to the Park District. In October of last year, our PAC renewed its resolution and so advised the Park District. To date, the Park District has yet to respond to our resolution. The planning process for the eastern end of the Midway has been marked by the stifling of public input. The procedural changes we have requested would allow the beginning of community input on this issue. Close his comment. And then finally, I would just make the point and call for an amendment to the Section 106 MOA. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mary Lou Seidel. I'm the Director of Community Engagement for Preservation Chicago. I will echo all of the comments that Bronwyn and Mark brought up in his letter. I'm particularly concerned. I think accessible parks, like everybody, are incredible. I would love, when I get to your questions, for you to defend your statement that it's one of a kind in the nation, but I really would, because that was a pretty big statement. I agree that this UPAR, did you have something you wanted to say? Sorry, thought you were talking to me. Okay, sorry. We find it incredible that for the same things, these alleged other sites that were given consideration for UPAR replacement parks were never disclosed. The full reason why they were dropped from the vetting list was never shared with us. And I believe that children in West Woodlawn would love to be able to go to a park nearer to their homes than this one. Replacing this park across the street from a formerly world-class park, which is going to be a world-class tourist destination, is really disingenuous to what UPAR is all about. I am not saying I'm opposed to accessible parkland and play areas like this. It is absolutely essential. There are better places for it. I still don't see on the map where if I have a child who is quadriplegic in a wheelchair, where I'm going to be able to park to get them comfortably to this site. That's very disturbing. But again, you're using UPAR for the wrong reason. And I think before you go on with this plan and this site, you should fully disclose, the City of Chicago and the Chicago Park District and the Department of Planning should fully disclose every other site they considered and why it was removed from the list. We were told, we looked at others, but they had environmental issues. That's not transparent or full disclosure. So before this goes any further, I really think you owe it to the City of Chicago and the people of the South Side of Chicago and the people of the nation who come here to visit, that we have full answers why this park, conveniently located across the street from a new, very expensive development, is what UPAR, the intention of the UPAR legislation was for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you for your comments. I did want to address a couple of them because I do think there's a little bit of a misperception of the process. So we have definitely talked many times before, and I have been to the Midway PAC to discuss how the UPAR process unfolded. So I completely understand the criticism. However, the National Park Service, the Federal Highway Authority, and tons of other federal agencies all signed off on this particular plan and agreed to it and negotiated it. So we all had to sign documentation under UPAR on this particular project. So it's a little bit not quite accurate to say that the National Park Service and UPAR is being mishandled, because that's the agency that manages it. And the Chicago Park District has no legal authority to change this plan or the site. So I just want to make that clear to everyone. I totally get that people are still have concerns about it, but I just want to make sure that it's clear. I understand the transparency argument. Yeah, that's a little bit different. I'm talking about, we don't have the legal authority to change this. Okay, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, so we went through an extensive research process, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation. And I think one of the things we did was we benchmarked against existing facilities throughout the United States, and we keyed on 6 specifically. I would say the one that would come closest to this would be the Magic Bridge out in California. I would say one of the things that we are doing that makes this unique is that it provides varying levels of challenges to the space. A lot of those other places, they are amazing in terms of their how they handle accessibility, how they treat maybe folks with autism or different challenges, but they aren't necessarily challenging them potentially in different ways or different gradations. And I think that's one thing that this design does that is wholly unique to this type of play space. It provides that opportunity to grow and to learn, where I think others are not necessarily going that route, so. There's a public parking lot just south of the, sorry, I got a bad image on here.
We can do a better diagram next time to zoom out and kind of show that. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name's Christy Rawson. I'm the treasurer of Impact. And first, just for the, I'm going to have a couple other questions, but I am in agreement with the last two speakers. And so I would just reiterate my support for everything that was said by Mary Lou Seidel and Bronwyn Nichols-Lodato. Part of what I was going to ask is sort of answered when you answered Bronwyn's question about the wetland. We didn't see any visuals, so I wasn't sure how that was being handled in terms of so there's an area that is not going to be mowed. It's not going to be just grass. There's going to be native water loving plants in there that are going to grow because they have more water than the lawn part. So there will be, I understand like you want to hasten the excess water into the groundwater, keep it from going into the sewer system. Is that going to meet the Army Corps of Engineers? I think it's a Section 404 review that they do around the Clean Water Act in terms of wetlands. So does that, if it's not being drained like it was going to be drained before, is it still going to go through a review with them, or how does that work?
We're not required a federal permit because CDOT mitigated for the wetland area during a previous phase of the project. So we're going to be developing this kind of independently and locally like we do at many of our other sites. So there won't be, that I'm aware of, any requirement for a 404 or federal process.
But it will need to meet all City of Chicago's stormwater ordinance requirements, which are very stringent. And I would say just professionally, as landscape architects and someone that employs ecologists and people that are into native landscaping and plants, it will be of a high quality.
Yeah.
And it will be maintained as a natural area. So it will have a special layer of maintenance to it as well, like our other natural areas.
Okay. In terms of the central portion, there are native low growing grasses that don't need to be mowed. And I'm thinking about like the transition between the wetland area and the center, if it would be possible to have the whole thing be mowed free. There's been some ground nesting birds that have been in that part of the Midway before, like it was kind of late to be mowed this year, and there was some ground nesting birds that got disrupted when it finally was mowed. And we were, a lot of us who were paying attention to the birds in the area were thinking if we could keep that entire area from being mowed and yet have it be appropriate for picnicking. And I think that can be done with native grasses that don't get tall.
Yeah, we've got a really excellent natural resources team and a person in particular that's kind of studying that and how different fescues and, low grasses can perform in parks. So that's something we can definitely consider.
So maybe a no
Like,
mow
yeah,
on there.
like,
That's really great to hear. And it is a beautiful design. I mean, for all of our problems with the site choosing and all of our, thoughts about environmental justice and park equity, we're certainly not here to, shoot down the really great work that's been done on a really beautiful and really creative design. I'm not clear on where the shade structure is. What is it? Is it the memorial that's being shaded, or?
No, it's going to be about 40 feet east of it. And so if you look at that, the memorial is actually just off the page here on the right. You maybe, Sarah, if you can point to that. Yeah, kind of right by the tree. So it's back into the left of that shade structure. So we're not putting a shade structure over the memorial.
Okay, I'm still kind of having a hard time picturing it, but so yeah, the trees on the west side next to the tracks do provide by this time of the year, by late morning, early afternoon, like the memorial and some of the benches are already getting shade. Those trees are pretty tall. And what's your idea about how to handle the area that's pretty densely wooded for the most part? Are you guys going to work with that at all? Is it going to be what's going to happen with that area?
To a degree, part of that is part of the railroad right of way, which has a lot of unique.
Yeah, there's a fence,
right?
But
Special
sort of
access
between the
requirements.
fence and the
But they also control some addition space over past that fence as well. And so one of the things we are looking at is there will be probably some selective tree pruning just to make sure there aren't any dangerous branches, things like that might cause a safety issue. But we are not going to be manipulating it too much because we still want to maintain some level of vegetative buffer, right? We talked earlier about the noise, making sure maybe folks don't go up the railroad right of way. So we're going to try to maintain that in its place currently.
Okay. I think that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Brenda Nelms. I'm with Jackson Park Watch and most of the park advisory councils and other things around here. I had several questions, but I've been struck by, sounds like a broken record, I know, the U-Part discussion. And I particularly, I believe you responded, Sarah, to Bronwyn's initial question about responding to the query from the Park Service about had there been public input into the decision making. And you said you'd report on that at the 5th community meeting. And I really think that y'all ought to address that and make it visible before then.
Oh, yes, that's fine. And so, and I haven't looked at that comment specifically in like a week or so. What I think it was, we're looking forward to see how you address public comment in the final plan, something like that. So I will review it, but yeah, absolutely.
I just think the 5th community meeting is going to be too late for people to understand what you're saying there. And there is a great deal of concern about the transparency of it also.
Understood. We'll work with our partners.
I had more questions about the specific design in several ways. One was, I was struck by or prompted by the discussion about the senses, the 5 senses being addressed, and made me think, what's going to happen in winter? Is this usable in the winter? What's going to happen, or not?
That's a great question. I would think it's always weather dependent, right? I think with anything, but as designers, 2 days a year. Right? As designers, when we think about we'll just talk about landscape areas specifically. When we just select plants and how we're going to lay out spaces, we constantly think 4-season interest, right? So there will be potentially trees that have really unique bark that the kids could manipulate. Hopefully they don't tear it all off. But or maybe there's some like red berries, right? Or some winter interest, or trees that have great fall color, early spring flowering trees, or maybe some ephemeral bulbs.
So those decisions haven't been made yet. You're still working on.
We're still working through how that could be viewed 4 seasons. I would say just from a usability standpoint, obviously weather dependent, but with anything in the walking surfaces, right? We're making sure that we're providing firm, stable, slip resistant walkways so you can go out there. Minus it being covered in ice or some other issue, but enjoy the park and play with it as much as you can throughout our horrible Chicago winters.
So that leads into my next question. I and quite a few others raised the whole issue of sledding down the embankment, which had been a pastime for many of our children. And there's no play, there's no way to do that anymore.
I would say strategically we've avoided adjusting the embankment and the grading to that. So
it's not adjusting the embankment, it's adjusting the things at the bottom of the hill that they would hit when you go down the embankment that's there.
We can take a closer look at that. We are required the north-south pathway by the MOA and the UPAR amendment. So that's a historic element that is required to go back in, but we can definitely take a look at
there might be some opportunities.
Equipment and benches and things like that.
Crosswalk, I understand that there has to be a north-south pathway, but there are multiple concrete interludes that would interfere. There are bushes being planted, there are things, and
we could take
and others said, this was the one active thing we could all point to that it had been used for, and it's being ignored. It's just been kind of brushed aside, and so I raised that again. And my last question, I believe, is had to do with the shaded, whatever that area is called. And I couldn't tell from the slide you showed tonight, but I had been concerned before about the pastel colors that were being used,
Sure.
which did not seem to me natural. And I would still like to express concern about that I think it's jarring in what's otherwise trying to be fit into a natural area and the both as to the extent it respects Olmsted at all. I don't think he would have picked the pastel colors.
We can take a closer look at that. Thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, it's me again, Cy Lewis. So I was just struck by some of the comments and I just wanted to add an additional comment. So having been a Park Advisory Council president, I just thought it was really important to announce that as Park Advisory Council members and leaders, to make it clear that we are an advisory council. We do not legislate. We do not make rules. We can have lawyers. We can have committee members. We can make suggestions. We can write up everything we want, but we are an advisory committee. And it's gracious for people to listen to our advice. No more than we can go to the mayor and tell her what to do for our city. If something positive is coming for our kids, then we have an obligation to listen. To take 70, 80, 100, 150, maybe 200 people to make a decision for all of Chicagoland or all of the South Side or for all of the children who could benefit from something like this is infuriating. To say that our kids can't sled down a park because we're putting in something accessible for kids who have no park that's accessible for them is absurd, because there's space in Midway for everyone's children to have accessibility. There is going to be a sledding area at the OPC. So everyone will have an opportunity to play, and everybody has an opportunity to have an opinion, but your opinion can't force the issue. So I just needed to say that, and I gotta go.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, I am Janora Stone. I am the president of Mamie Teal Park Advisory Council. So lovely display of the Midway play. Love the ideas. Let's not forget, because I heard someone say about West Woodline, but we have over 1,000 families that live in Jackson Park Terrace that have no play lot. OPC little lot will not be suffice. So let's not forget that other area and family members that live in the area also need somewhere to play. And yes, also, I'm sorry, but Brown and Mark, they can't speak for the whole impact, because I'm not in agreement with it, and I'm an impact member. So that's it.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Louise McCurry, Jackson Park Advisory Council President. Two things. One thing that make me really, really excited is that Jackson Park really is the park that brings kids in from all over the city to play. And so we have kids from South Side, from far South Side, from near South Side, from North Side, who come because we have the services that children need. We have the beaches, we have the playgrounds, we have the spaces. We don't have any place in the city of Chicago that has the ability for kids who need inclusion to be a part of the process. This really is so very exciting, because every kid can say, I'm a little kid now, because they can play like every other kid. I spend a lot of time working with kids with special needs. And for me, the most exciting thing is to take a special needs child and put them on a new adventure that makes them like the other kids. It gives them a chance to be equal. This is just the most positive, most exciting thing we can do. More importantly, we have the orthogenic school, we have race school, And we have Carnaby School right there, all of which have populations of kids that have special needs who will be able to walk and come to this program and absolutely have a wonderful time. So my question is really simple. It is, just as we've been able to make Jackson Park that mecca for people who want to have things in the water, for people who want to play disc golf, for people who want to be out and do something outside in green space in your 85, so you can play bocce ball. The idea is to have a place for kids to do other things. Do you envision kids from other places who are in need of inclusivity coming to this park?
Heather and Rob?
So Louise, let me make sure I understand your question. Do we envision kids from all over coming to the park?
From other parts of the city who need inclusivity coming to this park?
Oh, yes. I expect it's going to attract people to come. And I actually hope this is just the first of many of these types of playgrounds that we can do throughout the park district around the city, so that we're really thinking, we're hoping that this is a forward-looking playground and play space for people of all abilities to be able to feel welcome and to play next to each other. I think that's often something that we hear from our disability policy folks, is that it's one thing, like the swing that Rob pointed out is really unique. We have looked at that swing that just has space for the child in a wheelchair, and they're still very separated from the other kids who can use normal regular swings. So the fact that we were able to find one that allows them to play together is a really big deal, we think. So that we're not separating people with disabilities and different levels of mobility, but they're able to come together. They might not be able to use the equipment in exactly the same way, but they can still be next to each other and follow the path next to the tree. I'm gonna get this wrong, the tree line. Thank you, the tree top adventure course. So that they're not separate from one another. And we think that's a really important element of this space.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, Rhonda Nichols-Lodato, Midway Plaisance Advisory Council. Just wanted to provide the citation in the comments document for the National Park Service's comment. It's on page 7 of 23, and it was submitted by Joel Lynch. And he stated the following: the Urban Park and Recreation Recovery Program is administered by the National Park Service, NPS. As a result of the projects in Jackson Park, the City of Chicago City must provide the NPS the opportunity to confirm that the final design of the east end of the Midway Plaisance still meets the UPAR statutory equivalency requirements. The NPS looks forward to consultation with the city, outlining how public participation influenced the final design for replacement recreation opportunities of reasonably equivalent usefulness. So that was the statement. And then I just wanted to find out to what degree the design and utilization of concrete aligns with the Biden administration's new guidelines and regulations regarding concrete. Thank you.
Can you repeat that one more time? I have trouble hearing you.
Yeah, the Biden administration has issued new guidelines for utilization of concrete in building structures. And so knowing that this is part of a federally funded action, I just wanted to see, given that the design does call for concrete, how those the concrete standards will be met.
I don't think we're prepared to answer that today. That would be kind of a park district policy issue that we would probably have to follow up on.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
Hi, my name is Frank Avalon. I live in Hyde Park. When it comes to concrete, there's certain environmental difficulties with it, of course. Were other materials considered?
Yeah, I think we actually have other materials out here that are within the play space. Or we have crushed aggregate. We have, I think, some wood chip pass. We have a couple other materials. Concrete is one of the things we usually default to, mostly because that is one of the main surfaces. It has a high level of albedo, so it's reflective, so it doesn't heat up too much. But it's also, as the city likes to hit in all of the major ADA requirements, firm, stable, and slip resistant, right? That's kind of the three things that we're shooting for all pavements.
Thank you. I certainly wouldn't, as one of the prior speakers mentioned, I wouldn't quibble with the design. It seems like a very nice play area. I would quibble with the location. All the positive things that you've said about accessibility issues in particular could be cited elsewhere. I'm concerned that as an advocate While I'm recently retired, I spent 40 years doing anti-poverty work. This is yet another example where wealthier communities are getting benefit that low-income communities never see. Let me ask you, as a father and as a grandfather, though, I tend to think that unlike a bocce ball field and unlike a soccer field and unlike a golf course and unlike a picnic area, play spaces are usually used by kids under the age of 12 or 13, mostly kids in the elementary and preschool areas. I suspect, at least from my experience, that people walk there. They're not being dropped off. And we certainly don't want to encourage the use of cars in the era of climate change. So I guess my question is, how many people under the age of, say, 13 live within a quarter of a mile of this site?
Yeah, we don't have that information with us today.
Right, I'm just saying that would certainly be critical.
And I would just want to add, one of the things we went through and we talked about previously in kind of our design theory or principle about this is this is not like an age restricted playground. This is designed to challenge a wide range of participants, right? There might be someone that's 16 or 17 that still could get a lot of benefit out of this and might have a different type of ability that could really enjoy this play space. And you mentioned earlier about, being a grandfather. I think it's one of the things we've also thought about too, is making sure that it's accessible to not just 2 to 18, but 2 to 80, right? We want to make sure that these are great spaces for grandparents or caretakers to take their children or grandchildren to as well, because we know that a lot of those folks are the ones actually providing childcare during the day when you're visiting these parks. So
I think those are wonderful aspirations, but again, my comment would be those could be cited anywhere. I have one other question. From last I understood, and I could be very wrong about this, the project is approximately $3 million. I suspect with the new updated plan, it might be a bit more, but where's the $2.7 million shortfall coming from?
Yeah. So we are working with the city of Chicago. I hope that we will be able to have an announcement soon about funding, but we are required to build this playground. And so I don't have that information for you this evening, but that is absolutely something that we are working on with the city.
And isn't the memorandum of understanding contract have a clause in it that allows for amendments to the agreement?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch what your question was.
You've referred several times tonight that you're required to build this on this site. But my understanding is that the agreement itself can be amended, can be changed.
So I'm not an attorney, so I will not try to play one here this evening. But the Park District signed off, along with the city of Chicago, signed off on this agreement in the first place. So I realize there are some folks who are pushing to change it. My understanding from talking with the federal agencies that negotiated the memorandum of agreement and that we all signed is that we don't have the ability to change it. I mean, you're welcome to reach out to the Federal Highway Authority. They were the main federal body that managed the entire federal review process, but we've had discussions and that is our understanding.
Well,
So
that would
again,
be something for the next community meeting, is that you have in-house counsel, of course, and so you could get the answer to that question whether or not the
Well,
agreement
sir, I
is
think what I'm
amenable.
trying to say is we are not, the Park District is not attempting to amend this agreement. We are looking to execute what was negotiated in the.
I understand, and my point is that you could. Not that you're prohibited. That's the distinction I'm making. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Rachel Burkhan-Ramelfinger. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy with Friends of the Parks. And for those who don't know our organization, we advocate for equitable investment and transparency and public access to our parks and public participation in the governance and decision-making for our parks. So it is very exciting to see this accessible playground in terms of the accessibility part of our mission. And so I want to commend you for this very innovative design. I have a question about the bathrooms. I know you said they're going to be temporary. Are they going to be accessible? Like what is, I don't know what a temporary bathroom.
It's like a portable toilet. So there are accessible, it would be a rental. It would be probably seasonal installation if we put it out there. But there have been a lot of questions about restroom, washroom access at meetings. So we don't have funding right now to build a permanent restroom, and we don't intend to build a permanent restroom as part of this project. But we are looking ahead. We've cited kind of like the area where a permanent restroom could go. It works with the utilities that we're incorporating in the site. But without funding and without, moving that plan forward right now, we also wanted to identify spaces on the site where portable toilets could be located should they be needed. So there are ADA accessible portable toilets that we install in parks frequently.
I guess I would just say, we survey park users all the time, and we often hear bathrooms is like, and I'm sure you all hear that as well. And I understand funding constraints, but I think to prioritize that, because I do think that what if ADA accessible porta potty is not available on an exact time, right? That becomes a barrier to accessibility for those in the community. And I'd also just like to say, I know we submitted public comment, and while I appreciate you giving the feedback and overview, I think it's already been stated by many that concerns about the UPAR process were not revealed in your PowerPoint tonight. And I just want to again state that Friends of the Parks, as an organization, we have been in disagreement about how that process was taking place, and we did not support the placement of this play facility or any facility on the Midway. We didn't think it was an equitable use, nor did we see it as new parkland. And our concern is about how we should be developing new parkland and amenities in underserved communities across our city. And we should be making sure that community input is responded to and heard first. And I would commend you on at least attempting to address the issue of the wetland, which we also raised in our comments.
Thank you.
Hi, Christy Ronson again from MPAC, and there was a comment in the comments from the last comment period, the 45-day period from Landmarks Illinois, bringing up the question of who would be doing who would be the conservator to do the Cheney Good to restore the Cheney Good Memorial, and they brought up a National Park Service 1999 professional qualification standards. Do you anticipate needing to bring somebody else in that's an expert in that kind of restoration? I understand that it's a sandstone, so not kind of a fragile monument, or would you guys be doing that?
As a part of the public bidding process, we'd be providing plans and specifications that I'm sure would be in line with what you're talking about right there.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
The SHPO too is very interested in the specs and plans for
Right.
the restoration of the Cheney Good Monument. So we will not move forward without having everything cooked and baked.
Mhm.
But they will need to be qualified in that line of work. Is that something that we just hire some random person off the street to handle? But yes, there will be a qualified restoration specialist to deal with that.
Okay, good to know. And I'm also curious because the plan was made before when the wetland was going to be drained to do a mitigation where you sort of like buy a spot in Will County that becomes the wetland that was going to be drained here. Is that Will County mitigation thing? That's called off at this point?
That's done. That's
Oh,
done.
so we get an
done,
extra
case
half-acre
closed. So yes,
wetland.
there's gonna be surplus.
Net positive. That's okay. And I was going to ask about the restroom as well. Just sort of concerns about what that actually would be, the temporary, but that was answered. And yeah, I'm not convinced of the need for the shade thing. I think, I think the general comments from people have been, the less sort of structure, the better, and something that's sort of like raised up and, I'm not convinced that it's necessary because there's so much shade from the tall trees that are on the west side there. But yeah, and if it did need a shady area, maybe something that was a little bit more kind of historically appropriate.
Thank you.
My name is Deb Pratt. I'm an interested neighbor, and I wanted to just thank you for your professionalism and your kind way that you're listening and talking to all of us with very different opinions. I wanted to, in particular, thank you for the idea of creating a space for the whole lifespan, because I do think that the more opportunities we have for kids and especially grandparents can be together and learn together and have interest rather than grandparents who take their kids to someplace where there's absolutely nothing for them. I think that that's really important as I'm getting older and older. And again, just thank you for everything you've done. And it's a challenging process, and I think it's important for everybody to be able to say what they think. And good luck. Thanks.
Thank you.
My name is Richard King. I've been a Hyde Park resident for about almost 45 years. I've driven past this. I've biked past this. It's like just a lot of flooded grass with ducks running around. This is wonderful. I taught for 8 years at a special needs school, and this is incorporating some of the things, especially the sensory aspects that you had pointed out. It's excellent. This is outstanding, and I look forward to seeing this and seeing what we can do with this. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dwayne Daly. I'm the Executive Director for the Network of Woodlawn. One question is, how many meetings have we had around this particular development? At least 3, right?
This is our 4th.
This is the 4th. So we've been here before. I have publicly stood before you and indicated the support that the Network of Woodlawn and Woodlawn residents has for this specific development. So, you know, and I know that neighbors of mine in this meeting have discussed that there hasn't been public input, but given 4 opportunities to come out and meet, there has been public input. And we've also had online communication. Is that correct?
Correct.
How many surveys have we had online? At least 1, I know.
Yes, and we had a 45-day review
Right.
period was kind of the formal online
Right.
process. So far.
So community input is something that's important. And I think, you know, you have done a great job to make sure that the voices of the community have been heard. In this particular instance, there is some varying opinions anyway, about whether we should use this particular site. I think we all agree the idea of having a park for a disabled community for citizens in Chicago is a good idea. But as the gentleman said that spoke before me, this site right now is just a flooded area. It brings no value to anyone in its current condition, and you're proposing an improvement that I think would clearly bring a number of people to this site to use it and to enjoy it. We're all talking about the quality of life, not only in Woodlawn, but in Jackson Park and in Hyde Park. And this would clearly add to our quality of life. So I congratulate you on the idea and look forward to its implementation.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Deborah Devon, and I participate in a couple of the Park District action committees. And I'm a special ed teacher also. And one of the things I'm looking forward to is having the support that's necessary to support what you guys are trying to do. As a teacher, and we're there every day, it's not there. So if you guys can provide that, kudos to you. I think that the process, I think the 106, all these different processes do not bode much confidence that the public has been heard, because I've been at meetings. I actually went to court listening to the arguments that has to do with some other situation, but this is the same result of that review. So if you could understand that there's a tremendous amount of distrust that the community has because of how things have developed, and if there's any way that you could add more transparency, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks. That was Mary Lou Seidel again with Preservation Chicago. I do want to talk about this conversation about this is the 4th community meeting and there's been online access. My title is Director of Community Engagement. I have spent a lifetime, professional lifetime, not actually, I think I was organizing when I was a kid, but a professional lifetime in community engagement, meaningful, community-driven community engagement. And this process does not look like that at all. Having a community meeting and checking it off on your box and making minor changes here and there is not engaging the community. We have been asking since the very beginning, since before these 4 community meetings, for transparency specifically about the sites that you crossed off of your list and why and where they were located, and we haven't gotten that. So that is not meaningful community engagement. That's sitting here, getting our information, making a few tweaks to please a few people and going on about your business. And that doesn't feel genuine and it doesn't feel real. I also, I really want to, I'm sorry, the woman who had a lot of really sharp jabs to give at us, opponents to this location is gone, but this is not about anything but this park. I do believe, and I don't have it in front of me, I've read the MOA. Our organization did not sign any agreements or any consulting agreements, but I do believe there's a clause in there that all of the required signatories can amend the MOA. And again, I'm not a lawyer. I took some pre-law classes in college, but when it says a I think everyone has to agree to amend it, but I believe there is a clause in there, so you should probably take a look at that again. But this is listening to us is not community engagement. That's just listening and not doing anything about it. So that's important to keep note. Thanks.
So before you start, ma'am, one quick question. So I just want to acknowledge there is as an amendment process in it. I do not have the expertise for how that would be effectuated, which is why I said I'm not an attorney, but I can only speak for my agency. But I believe that you are right that all of the signatories to the agreement have to agree to it. It's not something because we signed onto it and negotiated this agreement that we have explored. Go ahead, ma'am.
Pat Harper again. And let me first apologize and say, this is the first community meeting, in-person meeting that I've been able to be. I couldn't make the first 3 unless the first one was the virtual Zoom one, so I don't know. But I keep hearing this terminology being thrown around, and again, I mentioned before as being a former Fed, that wetlands, at least to me, has a very particularized meaning. And I'm not, like you said, you're not a lawyer. I'm not someone that makes assessments but in my experience, that's not a wetland. And I lived in Hyde Park proper for over 20 years. Again, so terminology that is being loosely thrown around that has a particularized meaning provides a disservice to the public when you're trying to talk about these things. The gentleman who talked about this was just a flooded area. I mean, I was a ASO soccer coach and playing in the Midway, taking my kid. We could not use that, it stayed flooded. Being flooded doesn't make it a wetland in an official capacity. And it's been very non-usable by the neighborhood for as long as I've lived in Chicago, which was 77. So that's a big chunk of time. And, come see, so am I misunderstanding, or is it officially designated as some wetland, particularly because I thought this was all like landfill based on the Columbian Exposition back in I'm not a Chicagoan, so I don't know that, but back in the late 1800s. So, because they talk about the golf course was landfill and stuff was dumped and the garden and all kinds of different things. And I'm going, So I just wanted to make that comment and mention that I don't know that this has a time limit on it, but I don't know what else dead horse we can beat at this point.
Thanks.
Okay, hopefully this will be it. Bronwyn Nichols, Lodato, Impact for short. I just wanted to acknowledge and thank Preservation Chicago, Friends of the Parks for coming out tonight and supporting Impact's position to move the site of the playground, but still endorsing active usage of the recreational space that is located on the eastern end of the Midway. Impact is happy to talk with folks about ideas that the body has come up with for alternative uses of the space that does not necessitate
abrogating the requirements of UPAR designation. UPAR is a national program. What happens here can happen any other place. So just want to be mindful of that fact. In terms of the wetland question, ma'am, I do have information from the Army Corps of Engineers. I'm happy to share that with you if you want to take a picture of it from the reports. Okay, okay. Yeah, it's on the City of Chicago's website around the Jackson Park improvements. Yeah, no, absolutely. And so, no, I'm glad you brought that up because many times it's described as a nasty, flooded place. It is a wetland. And so there is a scientific function, a natural function, an ecological function in terms of carbon sequestration to offset the effects of climate change. So these are all considerations we're happy to talk about at another time, but just wanted to point out that it is a form of wetland. Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. Any last comments? Otherwise, if not, I'm going to move into next steps, but I want to give anybody else an opportunity that wants to speak. Please do so now. Pardon me, there's a lot of slides. So next up, please. Yep, absolutely. So, so the question was, so it's on the recording. There's a question about the timeline for the plan for interpretive materials. So as I mentioned, there are a couple other projects being exhibited in the hall out there. The plan for interpretive materials is one of them. It is another mitigation measure from the MOA. So it's another project that we're doing kind of in parallel to this work with our consultant team led by SOM. So the timeline for that, and I should have put a slide in here. We're working through engagement through the end of this year. So there's opportunity to weigh in on themes for interpretation for Jackson Park, and also kind of how it should be, how interpretation should be integrated to the park. So whether it is signage or whether it is a docent program, different kind of ways we can share the relevant stories about Jackson Park, both about its history and about its kind of significance in contemporary, Chicago. So please do check that out. So through the end of the year, we're still continuing to work with the public and also with consulting parties on gathering input on, the themes and so forth. And early next year, we hope to come out with a draft plan. That is also required a 45-day review period. So you'll be seeing some correspondence about that as we get to that point, but that will probably be January, February. So we've got a couple of months left of gathering input and kind of cooking and baking our draft. So with that, back to the Midway. Next steps, the comment form on the website is always open. So please feel free if you think of something tonight, if someone else wants to send information, please do go to the website, fill out the comment form. We do collect and read all the comments. This is a separate collector than the 45-day review period. So we've got 2 buckets of comments that we're working with. We're also going to post our presentation, as I mentioned, a recording to the website. So you may view that or share it with folks that might be interested, and they can provide feedback this way. We will be recording and documenting comments received tonight and incorporating that feedback into our next round of plans. As I mentioned, here's the website. I hope everybody's been there. As I mentioned, we are required to wrap up the planning and design portion of this project in the MOA by the end of this year. So we are working on refining the plan after this meeting, and then we're going to work on our next step of review, which is coordination with the National Park Service and IDOT SHPO. So that's what's going to happen next. It's a little different than the 45-day public review period. They are going to take the plan that we have now, they're going to review public feedback, and they're going to approve it or ask for questions and comments, and we'll work with them on that. So we are working on kind of exactly how that process works right now. There are a lot of agencies involved in this process, so we're working with our friends at IDOT, our friends at CDOT, our friends at DPD, and the Federal Highway Administration to kind of figure out next steps for coordinating that process. But we heard you want to check in before our next public meeting, so we'll figure out how to do that, to talk about the process and where we're at. And then we will also announce a date for the 5th and final public meeting in a couple of months to share results of the review with MPS and the other agencies that I mentioned and collect any final feedback. There is a timeline in the MOA that requires the site to be open, I think spring of next year. It might be
Spring of 24.
Spring of 24. Thank you. So it might be part of the DPR amendment. So we are on schedule to hit that mark right now, but we kind of got to stay on track. So we are really pushing to get our reviews in by the end of this year. Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming. Let us know if you have any further questions. Please visit our stations out in the Ante room if you're interested in any of the projects. We've got consultants out there to answer questions. Thank you very much.